Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition of Nebraska Football Now. I'm your host, Andy Classen, joined by our Husker insider, Jake Bartecki. Jake, that was a tough one, 37-10. I think a lot of people thought Nebraska could lose this game, but not very many of us believed we could lose it in that fashion.
You kind of took the words right out of my mouth. The game played out the way I kind of thought it would in terms of the problems that Nebraska faced and the problems Nebraska, inflicted kind of on themselves were glaring. I think TJ Lateef, freshman quarterback, tough atmosphere, that shined through. Obviously, they had trouble stopping the run. They really couldn't get in a flow offensively. We said it last week. James Franklin might have been fired, but Penn State still had all of those same guys that were the reason they were preseason ranked number 2. Unfortunately, it just didn't shape out for Nebraska, and I think, the opening drive, getting stuffed, going for it on 4th and short, I think that put a bad taste in everyone's mouth and just kind of, like the Michigan game a little bit, set a bad tone for the game.
You brought that point up. I want to dive into that because I was kind of surprised to hear so many Nebraska pundits, writers, radio guys throughout the week kind of getting behind the coaching staff saying we needed touchdowns in order to win that game, so they had no issue with kicking the field goal in that spot. My mentality is go ahead and take the lead and see what happens. There's something to be said from playing behind when you're having the type of season Penn State is.
Yeah.
And even if you lose, I still like to be able to say we were winning that game at one point in time. Go ahead and shift the pressure back onto Penn State. So I wanted the field goal there. I wanted the 3 points.
I was fine with going for it. I mean, I think you go back to that Michigan game that I referenced just a moment ago. That's one where I would have kicked the field goal. Michigan's really tough in the red zone. They always have been. I was okay with going for it. I didn't really like the play call. And I actually asked Dana Holgorsen about this week. I mean, what needs to happen to make those plays successful? Well, he was right in saying, look, you had 58 rushing yards on that drive. You had a 52-yard run by Emmett Johnson on that drive. You want to, strike while the iron's hot, get the ball to your best player. The problem is Penn State knew exactly what was coming. I mean, they brought the safety in, they rushed him right up the middle, and basically took Emmett's head off. Now, I think in that situation, if you want to go for the touchdown, which I think there was no reason not to, you try a little pass there. I mean, that's what they did against UCLA on that 4th and short, and they got Ja'Cory Barney open in the flat, and he tiptoed his way in for 6. Right. I would have tried to open up the playbook because Penn State knew exactly where Nebraska was going. And I can't blame them for wanting to get the ball to their best player, but you got to understand, everybody in the country now knows who Emmett Johnson is.
Well, we weren't the only ones kind of surprised by that lopsided score. Head coach Rule was a little surprised. Let's hear his thoughts.
I thought we were prepared. I thought we were ready. I'm pretty good about never throwing people under the bus. I'm not throwing them on the bus. My point to them was you're way better than you played. And it's, what feels like an avalanche sometimes. You go back and look at it. It's 10-3 with 4 minutes left. I think it's with 4 minutes left in the half. And then you just had we typically don't have kind of those collapses, right? We had a little bit of a collapse, right?
So obviously talking run defense, heard from Coach Rule there. What are your thoughts? How can we help? How can Nebraska help itself in terms of rushing defense?
Well, I think, you got to get to the portal. That's one thing. I think there's also something to be said for the scheme that John Butler likes to run, the 3-3-5. I don't necessarily think he's got the bodies and the types of players and maybe I don't want to go after the skill, but I'm going to go after the skill. The players that have the skill up front to be able to do that. Now, one thing Matt Rule said is, he was surprised by it, the outcome. I'm kind of tired of hearing that. I think I'm fully behind Matt Rule, and I'm glad Nebraska locked him up for an extension, but it feels like that's a go-to line. Every time Nebraska gets blown out of a game, he didn't see this coming. My question is, why didn't you see it coming? What led you to thinking that this team was prepared, and what led you to think that there were these matchups that Nebraska was going to be able to win? Because it's proven, we've seen it time and time again against teams that have 4 and 5 stars. Nebraska's just not there, and I think that's a takeaway I had from this outcome is Nebraska closer to being where they want to be? Yes, the roster's closer, but it's not there yet, and neither is Nebraska. I fully believe that from 2023 at the end of the season to now, Nebraska's a better football team. They've got better players. I think they've got better football IQ. I think the game plans are better, but I don't think they are quite where Husker Nation or even where they want to be either.
Maybe they all meant, forget year 3, this is a year 4 type of deal. So when we're thinking year 3 in the preseason, should have been saying year 4.
Yeah.
A lot of folks were looking at the offenses maybe being a little sluggish on the road. Didn't really make sense because it's still a big game. And the Matt Rule, comparisons with Penn State and all that stuff that was going on just a few weeks ago. Was it more of just the defense having a tough go of it, maybe not matching up very well? Or in my mind, I thought the offense looked pretty vanilla, and maybe that was to try and help protect our young quarterback.
I think that was a lot of it, as I think, that we saw it against UCLA. Dana Holgorsen called a game that with the theory in mind of let's not put our freshman quarterback in a tough spot, and I think that's the same thing. Dane Key got open a few times. 4 catches for 48 yards for him. Emmett Johnson was pretty bottled up, but he still had over 100 yards. There were good flashes. Problem is 152 of those 103 yards came on that opening drive on one play for Emmett Johnson. So, I think part of it also was the offense was on their heels. The defense couldn't get stops. And, people talk a lot of times about the defense, being on their heels a lot. Well, the offense was too, because Penn State was moving the ball quickly and scoring a lot. And I think that made it hard. Nebraska was playing from behind, and there was no fluidity between the offense for Nebraska, and I think a lot of it had to do with the defense's play.
Yeah, and Nebraska's offense actually ran quite a few more plays than Penn State's offense. It's just that the Nittany Lions were so efficient.
Yeah.
Only 39 runs, totaling just over 230 yards. Right. It felt like a lot more than that. Record-breaking day, and really just the way they're able to push our guys around. You alluded to some fixes there. Let's hear from defensive coordinator John Butler and his thoughts on how to try and fix up this defense.
I feel like I have some answers to that. The issues are fundamentals. Keep working on fundamentals. We have a lot of young players that I think are going to get better. I think after the season, we have to improve our roster as well as it relates to, run defenders, the level of physicality, the level of size, the level of the ability to be harder to block, so to speak. We've committed a lot of schematic resources this year to stopping the run, and sometimes that gets dangerous. It got dangerous last week when we're blitzing to stop the run and the quarterback can go 11 for 12 because we're having to pressure to stop the run, which exposes your coverages. So I think it's a collective effort of scheme. It's a collective effort of improving your current players and then doing a great job that when you have the opportunity to improve your roster at the end of the year, you do that with a specific intent in mind, and that would be one of them.
Okay, so he was a little bit more cordial about it, kind of a blend between personnel concerns, but also coaching up the personnel that you have on hand.
Yeah, and getting to the portal too. I think I think that's what he means by roster improvement. So that's I think number one for me is you got to go out and you got to get some interior linemen. The one thing he didn't say that I think too, and I think you could say it about the offensive line and some of the offensive positions, is Nebraska's got to be more physical. Far too often, we see games where Nebraska is, and partially it's because of the players that they have and the size of the guys they have. They are out-physicaled, if that's a word, by the opponent. And I think you saw that from the first snap against Penn State. They were blowing guys off the line. They were applying harder hits. Archie Wilson, by the way, with a hit. That was pretty cool to see. But, overarching, I think the physicality was on the Penn State side of the football. And I think that's one I would throw in there as well that I'd like to see.
You brought up a little bit to do with scheme. You talked about the 3-3. Would it help to get another defensive lineman in there, maybe run a 4-3 base defense, just get another body, especially if you're outmanned, outgunned? And everybody's kind of agreeing on that maybe Nebraska's defense is a year away.
I'd say that's fair. I think for this year's team, when you just look at the roster and you look at the type of guys you have, your defensive linemen. You've got Elijah Judy in there. You've got Keona Davis, Riley Van Poppel, Cam Lenhart comes in. Sometimes at the end positioning, like a Jack style, you see Desan McCullough. I think with the type of guys Nebraska has right now, that makes a lot more sense because they just don't have that strength and the physicality. And you get another body in there, obviously that makes things a little better. And I think you can get away with 3 linebackers perfectly fine. The secondary is, I think they've been good enough where I think you have options there, and I think you can do just about anything. Second best pass defense in the Big Ten in the nation right now. So for this year, yes. For next year, your guess is as good as mine because a lot of it's going to depend on what Nebraska can find in the portal.
And I get it. It's going to be pretty tough going into the last game of the season to just switch your base from 3 down linemen to 4. I get it. But there's going to be a spotlight on that defensive line. Also going to be a spotlight on our quarterback making his 3rd start at home. Another big game, big atmosphere. Let's hear from Coach Rule and what he's thought of TJ Latif's performances so far.
I thought, you go to Beaver Stadium, you're in silent cadence. That's hard for a quarterback. All his motion shifts. Mentally, I thought he was elite. He didn't make the catastrophic mistake. Even on the sack at the 1-yard line, I think I said to you guys the other day, that ball doesn't hit the ground. We're still able to punt it away. He moved the offense. We just didn't score enough touchdowns in the red zones. And once we got behind, then you're not collecting points and kicking field goals. You're having to go for it.
Overall, pretty happy, and I'd have to agree with him.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, probably. It's still probably above average.
Yeah.
At least from the 2 games he started. I mean, the USC game is I kind of give that an incomplete because he was thrown in there so suddenly, and unfortunately because of Dylan Raiola's injury. But I think overall, didn't have a great completion percentage this past weekend. 21 of 37. For over 100 yards. But again, Nebraska had so little fluidity in that offense. This is his, believe it or not, it doesn't feel like it, but it's his first start at home. So I'm interested to see how the crowd responds to him. I'm sure there'll be a lot of support. I'm curious also to see how Dylan Raiola operates on the sidelines because we haven't seen Dylan Raiola since the USC game. He has not been cleared to travel for any of those road games. I'm sure he'll be on the sidelines coaching up TJ Latif, and I'm curious if that helps him a little bit this weekend. And, it's a tough Iowa defense that Dana Holgerson says hasn't changed in about 25 years since he played him in the Alamo Bowl. So be a good test for the freshman.
Well, before we get into the Friday game, early kickoff, it's not all doom and gloom on the campus of UNL. We are regular season volleyball champs in the Big Ten once again. And this is one of those deals where we won the Big Ten, no question about midseason through, whether it's Harper Murray coming from the back row, Laney Treboy with a spectacular dig. You also got Waverly native Becca Alec just dominating the middle just ferociously. There's still some unfinished business. They're not satisfied with just winning the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I mean, really, all they're playing for now in these last 2 matches they're going to face this weekend is to go undefeated. And I do think I almost hope a little bit, and this is a good thing to say if you can say this about your team. I hope they get challenged a little bit. They did last week against Iowa, and same against Indiana in a set. And of course, they went on to sweep both of those matches, but. When Nebraska gets to the Final Four or the Elite Eight, they're going to run into a Pitt, a Texas, a really good team. Kentucky, absolutely right. I mean, a team they went to 5 sets with earlier this season. Who knows? Maybe you run into Creighton too. You're going to run into a team that is going to test you a little bit. You have to be able to get yourself familiar with those situations in close sets. And I think Danny Bustum-Kelly probably does a great job of setting up those scenarios in practice. One player that really has impressed me the past couple of weeks, and obviously she impressed a lot of people, who's Big Ten Freshman of the Week, is Virginia Adriano. I mean, the Italy native has been really strong. I mean, had season highs in aces, really close to a season high in kills against Iowa. She's been really impressive to me. Yeah. And then I think, if there's any setter that is up for or deserves Player of the Year, it's Bergen Riley. Yeah. I mean, Nebraska's been hitting around 350 all season. You just don't see those kind of numbers, and that just doesn't happen without a high-level setter.
I mean, Riley has so many mouths to feed, front row, back row attackers, and she does such a good job.
Spreads the love.
Yep, spreading the love and keeping that defense off balance. And you brought up Virginia. That's a great point. She's really showing you what type of weapon she can be, not only as an attacker, an outside hitter. We know those things. You brought up the services and all the aces that she can generate there as well.
Yeah, no doubt. She's been really strong, and I think, you know, at the beginning of the season, it wasn't the case, really. She struggled early on, and I think it's hard for her to have jumped into this, you know, new country, new team. She's a little older. I mean, she's a freshman, but with her eligibility, I mean, she's older than that. So, you know, it was Allie Check who was getting a lot of those. Now Allie Check really only comes in when Virginia Adriano struggles, and when she's coming, she's done a really nice job as well. Taylor Landfair off the bench has been really good too. You know, speaking of Landfair and Check, they both got drafted in the pro volleyball draft, so congratulations to them.
Yep, very cool. Very special season that the Huskers are working on the hardwood volleyball team. Basketball is doing pretty good right now too.
Yeah.
We'll keep an eye on that as well. But let's get to the Iowa game, the Heroes game. Iowa wins a close one last week. They are 7-4, knocking off Michigan State. Last second field goal for the victory. Where have I heard that before?
Maybe the last 2 years, 3 out of 4.
Well, let's dive right into it. This is an Iowa team. I use the rinse, repeat. Strong running game, strong rushing defense. Two things that Nebraska has had trouble with all season long. What do the Huskers need to do to be competitive in this one?
I'm going to kind of allude a little bit into my keys here. I think you got to be physical. I mean, you have to wake up on Friday morning, you know, body full of turkey and stuffing from the night before. You got to be ready to go in there and win in the trenches. I mean, this is a team that, we've talked about it every time we've done this show. Whenever we mention Iowa, we talk about their physicality and how they're just going to punch you in the mouth right up the middle. Nebraska's got to be ready to punch back. And you know, their offensive line is really highly graded by PFF for good reason. Their running backs, I mean, they've got 4 different guys who are averaging 5 yards per carry. Yeah. And they've got, I wouldn't say a great quarterback, but a better quarterback in Gronowski than they've had in the past. And, you know, John Butler talked about it this week. They've got a bunch of different running backs, but they all kind of run the same concepts, and they're all really successful at it. So the bonus to that is Nebraska knows what they're going to get. I mean, Iowa's going to come in and try to run the ball. I think you could have said the same thing about Penn State, but maybe that Penn State loss and the struggles you face running the ball all year, maybe it's getting you ready for maybe a better running team than Penn State was.
Is this a spot where maybe Nebraska just needs to be Nebraska and just understand that, hey, you do have a lot of weapons offensively. Why don't you just try to go out there and outscore somebody? If Latif throws a few interceptions, plays like a freshman, so be it. But at least you went down swinging and not getting caught up trying to out-Iowa.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to because, you know, when you play a team like Iowa, and this is how they stay in games with teams like Indiana, like they played a close game with, like Michigan State hanging with Iowa. I mean, it's kind of a double standard here. Or Oregon, is Iowa takes so much time. I mean, they dominate time of possession. So you don't really know how many possessions you're going to have. I think, you know, you go down 7-0, 10-0 early, you're going to have no other option but try to open it up. Now, I think Nebraska's actually might have a decent matchup against Iowa's pass defense. I think, you know, Dane Key's got the height over some of those safeties and corners that Iowa has. And Isaiah Hunter had 1 catch against Penn State. You've got to try and get him more involved. And if that means going back to the short screen pass or slant pass or hook and ladder route, I mean, you can do that. But you got to be able to move the ball down the field quickly against these guys because, like I said, you just don't know how many opportunities you're going to have to score. And like I've said, that gets Iowa into trouble too because sometimes that allows teams to hang in the game with them because they aren't able to build up as much of a lead as they can. But we've seen it happen, though. Minnesota game this year is a perfect example where they pounded the Gophers after Nebraska had lost 24-6 to them. Yeah. That was because Iowa was able to move the ball down the field effectively. They hit a few big plays, but all in all, it was also their defense shut down Minnesota.
Well, you don't have to call this a rivalry game, but it's something. There is bad blood between the fan bases of the teams. Last year's did not disappoint. We had handshake gate before kickoff even happened. Coach Rule came out and said, "No, we respect them. We're gonna shake their hand this year, regardless of what's going on before the game, after the game." Remember, Iowa didn't even let us do our pregame prayer at the 50-yard line. Yeah, that was interesting. So this is a spot where maybe it's not old school Nebraska, Texas, Nebraska, Oklahoma type of feeling, but there's something to it.
There is. I don't know how much the handshake thing will play in, specifically because a couple of those guys are gone. MJ Sherman and Elliott Brown are no longer at Nebraska, graduated. By the way, happy senior day to the 19 seniors that we'll see get a walk before the game. But yeah, I mean, I think, if there's anything that's playing into the game in terms of the rivalry, it's how Nebraska's lost the last few seasons against Iowa. I mean, 2 straight years where they've lost on a last-second field goal. Last year's probably hurt the most. I mean, 48-yard field goal, to in the cold. It was like 8 degrees out, and Drew Stevens hits a 48-yarder for the win. The year before, you get told, have a Merry Christmas because Iowa prevents Nebraska from going bowling, and that's when Iowa was ranked in the top 25. I mean, that would have checked a lot of boxes in year 1 for Matt Rule, and it would have almost felt like house money to a degree. I think that probably plays more in a part of it in terms of Nebraska's struggled so much against Iowa, and I think that probably goes a long way in terms of getting Nebraska motivated.
Okay, well, let's dive right into it. What are the 3 Jake Bartecki keys to victory?
Well, I think number one, I'm not, because Nebraska's struggled so much defending the run, I'm not even going to go there. What I'm going to say, though, in the place of stopping the run, match the physicality. I want to see Nebraska come out and play with a little tenacity and a little attitude where they make a big hit on one of Iowa's running backs, where they try and thump the receivers, make a big hit and go after somebody. Number 2, I think it's Emmett Johnson. You got to look to Emmett Johnson in terms of being able to get the offense going. TJ Lateef, first home start. Yeah, that's big, but I think Emmett Johnson's the best player on your team, and I think you need to turn to him a lot. And my last one here, score in the red zone. Nebraska's been really struggling with that, and I think it comes a little bit on the coaching staff and a little bit on the players, but we talked about this already. You don't know how many opportunities you're going to have to score against Iowa simply because of their style of play. When you get an opportunity, especially if it comes off a turnover or a big special teams play, if they give you a gift, you got to open it and score.
Maybe something like an opening drive where your running back, Emmett Johnson, rips a 52-yarder off and you get within, the 10-yard line there. We got your thoughts over the Penn State game, and you were okay with Nebraska going for it, rolling the dice, going for that touchdown. In this type of game where you're feeling like it could be low scoring, would you kick the field goal here in the red zone?
Yeah, I mean, it's all situational, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if it's the opening drive, probably, because, you said it. You don't know how many times you're going to have a lead. And I think that's, with the Penn State game, if they would have kicked that field goal, they would have been able to say they had a lead and they scored on their opening drive. I think you take points against Iowa any chance you get. Now, obviously, there's going to be situations. If you're, it's 4th and 1 and you're at the goal line, it becomes a little bit more of a discussion because Iowa's offense struggles when they're backed up like that. So, overall, though, against a team that doesn't allow many points, you take points when you can get them in any way you can get them.
That's interesting. And that is the back and forth, and I hear both sides to it. Take the points against Iowa, roll the dice, go for a touchdown against Penn State. I just feel like we're at a point where we just need points, and I don't care how we get them or how many, just take the points.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear it. What's your prediction?
I am taking Iowa 21-17. I feel like Nebraska's offense is going to struggle at times, and I think, Iowa's going to run the ball really well against Nebraska. I think, until I see Nebraska, I said it last week with my prediction in the Penn State game, until I see Nebraska really shut down a team whose identity is running the football and solely running the football, I don't know if I can pick them. Now, I think Nebraska, the potential is there for them to create a turnover early on and maybe set up some points. Maybe a special teams play comes in. I mean, Iowa's special teams against Oregon specifically, they made some mistakes. So it shows they're not necessarily the almighty when it comes to special teams. They're very, very good. But I think, one touchdown Nebraska is going to get is going to be set up by a defensive play or a special teams play. What about you?
Well, I 100% agree with your thoughts that Iowa's probably going to have some success running the football. Nebraska's going to have some trouble stopping their running attack. So the only way for Nebraska, in my estimation, to stay in this one, pull off a victory, is just open up the offense and go for it. I mentioned it right at the top of this show. We cannot out Iowa.
Right.
We got to be ourselves. We got to play to our strong suit. Get the ball to Dane Key. Get the ball to Isaiah Hunter. Let our, all-conference caliber running back get the ball on a swing pass. All these things. And then just, if Lateef throws a couple interceptions, has a couple fumbles, you can live with that. He's a true freshman quarterback. But at home, let it all hang out. It's the last game. It's basically a playoff game type of a feel for us anyway. It's a rivalry. I think Nebraska really opens it up. That's going to allow for scoring on both sides because our defense isn't going to stop their run. okay?
Are we going win here?
We are going to win. We're going to
Whoa.
win. We're going to win. 28-27. You heard it here. That is our best path, in my estimation, for a victory.
I think, 28-27 to be a lot of points in this game.
Of course.
I think that, if this game becomes a shootout, I like Nebraska's chances simply because Iowa's not used to playing in those type of games.
Well, and maybe Iowa will say, like, oh, my gosh, we already have 2 touchdowns. Let's slow it down. Fine, I'll take a 15-14 victory.
Yeah.
But I do think Nebraska has to pour on the offense, risk it a little bit, and fortune favors the bold. And what do you got to lose?
I'm here for it, man. I mean, I think, you look at I think the over-under's 39. That'd be crushing that.
You better believe it. I just think it's time that our coaches just said, you know what, let's see what these boys can do.
Yeah.
And let's not play to win the fourth quarter. I like that, but let's play to win every quarter. How about that?
I like it. I like it a lot.
Jake, thanks for stopping by and sharing that wonderful information with us. And thank you for joining us on another edition of Nebraska Football Now.